Well, that was fucking dreadful.
Before we get started on this video today, I'd like to just ask anyone who isn't already if you could consider subscribing to my channel. It really helps me out at this time trying to grow the larger audience. Scotland are out of Euro 2024 after just the group stage. And to be honest, I feel like this is quite harsh. Right, before we go any further, let's start with the squad. So this was the 28-man provisional squad that Steve Clarke listed before the tournament. Beginning with the goalkeepers, and it was pretty obvious to anyone who's paid any attention to the Scottish national team in the last year and a half that Angus Gunn would start every single game at this tournament. It basically came down to a sense of which one of Zander Clark, Craig Gordon or Liam Kelly do you leave at home. It didn't really matter. Craig Gordon was the one who, after the Finland game, was told he would be staying at home, and to be honest, it was probably deserved. Moving into the defence, and this is where things get a bit more complicated. Now, at left back, we would be perfectly fine. Andy Robertson and Kieran Tierney, brilliant. Centre back, not bad. There was probably an argument that Liam Cooper could have been left at home for maybe John Souttar, but otherwise, it wasn't really that bad all in. Tierney would more than likely play every game, as I said, as a left-sided centre back. Ryan Porteous, who had been brilliant all through qualifying, looks to have nailed on a continued first team place in the squad, so he would be playing basically every game. And the last one would rotate between Jack Hendry, Grant Hanley. There wouldn't really have been any minutes for Souttar, but there wouldn't have been any minutes for Cooper either, so it doesn't really matter, but Souttar is younger. Now, the big issue with the defence was obviously the right side of it, which had seen both Aaron Hickey and Nathan Patterson injured before the tournament started. Now, this, coupled with the fact that Max Johnson and Calvin Ramsey were far too young and far too inexperienced, meant that Scotland had to fall back and rely on Anthony Ralston and Ross McCrory. Now, whilst these guys are two honest players who aren't that bad, you know, one's just moved to Bristol in the Championship and the other one's a backup right back for Celtic, but they're not Euro quality. There's certainly a downgrade from both Hickey and Patterson, and neither of them have a ceiling anywhere near as high as Ramsey and Johnson. But hey, we can't throw inexperienced players in, and we can't make injured players fit overnight, so we were going to just have to make do. Moving into the midfield, and this was pretty perfect apart from the big absentee, which was Lewis Ferguson. Billy Gilmore, John McGinn, Callum McGregor and Scott McTominay made a solid midfield four. Then moving into the attackers, this is where things get quite interesting. Shea Adams, Lyndon Dykes and Lawrence Shankland, fair enough. Ben Doak was added for some reason, who was far too young and far too inexperienced, and James Forrest was brought in off the back of maybe 10 decent games for Celtic. I mentioned all of this in my previous video, the Scotland road to the Euros. However, I ended up being right. Forrest played no minutes. Ben Doak ended up being injured in training and was left out for Lewis Morgan, and unfortunately Lyndon Dykes would pick up an injury which would see him miss the tournament.
Oh, for Christ's sake!
All in all, with the injuries we had, Steve Clarke picked a pretty solid squad. No one could really complain with this. There was no major misses, there was no horrendous picks and decisions, nothing was controversial. He picked who he should have picked. Now, before the tournament, Scotland would play two friendlies. Their first friendly would be away at Gibraltar before we would face Finland at Hampden. Now, this was Steve Clarke's team going into the Gibraltar game. A game that we would be expected to win. We'd be expected to be the better team, to control the game, to be attacking. Steve Clarke opted not to go with his usual 3 centre backs and 2 wing backs, and instead go for a flat 4 in an attempt to be more attacking. Rare starts were handed to Zander Clark, Kenny McLean and Lawrence Shankland. Ross McCrory came in to start on his full debut, and James Forrest was brought back into the squad for his first start in years. Scotland would go on to win the game 2-0 despite being 0-0 at half time. 77% possession for Scotland, 25 shots. Scotland were all over Gibraltar. A goal from Ryan Christie in the 58th minute and a goal from Shea Adams in the 85th minute after coming off the bench. Overall, quite a decent start for Scotland, a nice and easy first game. Good to get some minutes in the legs of some people that haven't played as much. Scotland's second friendly before the tournament started would see us play Finland at Hampden. Steve Clarke opted to go back to his traditional style. 3 centre backs would play behind 2 wing backs who would be very attacking. 2 controlling midfielders. A lone striker with 2 attacking mids sat behind him. An own goal in the 54th minute saw Scotland take the lead before Lawrence Shankland would score a second 4 minutes later. Now, by about the 70th minute, Steve Clarke started to play the game wise. We had 20 minutes left in a friendly. The tournament started in just a few days, so he started taking people off. A mistake from the backline in the 72nd minute seen Finland grab one back. And then, in a moment of just wildness, Craig Gordon, who had been brought on as a thank you for his contribution to the national team, basically it was expected that he would be the goalkeeper that would miss out on the tournament, and of course he did. And you could almost say we were glad that he did, because for some reason in the 85th minute he decided to punch a Finnish person.
And actually, that wasn't very nice.
Giving away a penalty, and the Finns made it 2 each. Now, look, for as much as this seems like a disappointing result because we blew a 2-goal lead, by this point we were really starting to take people off, and the emphasis was more on just don't pick up any stupid injuries late on. The Finns had the momentum, we were just trying to see the game out. So, no one should have been too worried about this. We'd beat Gibraltar in a game where we completely controlled them, and we should have beat Finland. Under normal circumstances, in a competitive game, we would have beat Finland.
Okay, let's go.
So, Scotland would play the opening game of Euro 24 against the host nation, Germany. This is the team that Steve Clarke put out for the game. Angus Gunn started in goal with the suspected back five of Robertson, Ralston, Porteous, Hendry and Tierney. The midfield was almost perfect, with McGinn, McTominay and McGregor expected to start, but McTominay was placed as the other holding mid next to McGregor, with Steve Clarke opting to go for Ryan Christie instead of Billy Gilmore. And Shea Adams led the line. Some people would have expected Lauren Shankland, but yeah, not much of a difference. So, how did this game go? It was an absolute disaster. 10 minutes into the game, the Germans opened the scoring as Florian Wirtz was left with far too much room at the edge of the box. In the 19th minute, Jamal Musiala would score an absolute thunder cunt of a goal. Now, at this stage, things are pretty bad. It's only the first half, we're already 2-0 down against a host nation who are better than us on paper and have the momentum of the game. What we needed was 20 minutes to just regroup, find our feet, hold the score as it was and try and come into the game in the later stages. In the 45th minute, Ryan Porteous made a tackle which seen him receive a straight red card after almost taking Ilkay Gundogan's leg off. Now, I'll talk more about the effects of this later on in the video, but for now we'll just leave it at the Make-A-Wish kid scored. In the 68th minute, Phil Craig would score an absolute rocket after Scotland gave Germany far too much time and room in their own box. A free kick from deep seen Scotland actually get a goal back in the 87th minute from an Antonio Rudiger own goal. And then in the 93rd minute, Emre Can again scored from deep.
That is one big pile of shit.
Now, for Scotland, this game was an absolute disaster. The penalty was a moment of absolute stupidity from Ryan Porteous. He had to make a challenge, but he didn't have to try and take the man's leg off in the process. The straight red card meant that he would miss the other 2 games in the group, so his Euros was pretty much over. I cannot stress how stupid a decision that was from Porteous, how bad a challenge it was, and how much he let the nation down. Florian Wirtz and Emre Can's goals both came from the Germans being given far too much room at the edge of our own box, whilst Musiala and Phil Craig's goals came from us giving the Germans far too much time and space in our own box. A dreadful start to the tournament from Scotland, but it wasn't all down and out. See, although it was a heavy loss, we were expected to lose to the Germans anyway. If we lost 5-1 or 1-0, we got the same amount of points. The only thing this really changed was it meant that Scotland most likely weren't going to progress on goal difference. We would have to actually take points from games in order to go through now.
It's hard to understand, but at least now it can't get much worse.
Now, we had to bounce back, we had to put in a better performance, and we had to try and take something from this game, or it was basically done and we were going home. Steve Clarke made the change that I think we all wanted and dropped Ryan Christie to bring in Billy Gilmore and go for his more usual system. This was much better. Gilmore and McGregor as a midfield pairing gave us much more control, which we desperately needed. We could not hold on to the ball to save our life against Germany. Now, Scotland's big issue for this game was, in a short way, back passes. We were dreadful at playing the ball back to Angus Gunn or just the next person behind them. So many loose passes were just spreading everywhere and we were opening ourselves up to trouble. However, with absolute delight in the 13th minute, Scott McTominay put us in front. He was our best player and our main goal threat through qualifying, and in the last year in a Scotland shirt, he has been nothing short of phenomenal. However, in the 26th minute, another loose back pass seen Xherdan Shaqiri score one of the goals of the tournament. Now, although Switzerland were expected to be the much better team in this game, it was actually pretty even. Switzerland only had a little bit more possession, whereas Scotland had more shots. Realistically, this could have went to either team. A draw was probably a fair result, but this was much better for Scotland, and we walked away from this game actually kind of annoyed that we didn't win it. However, we had one major downside to this game. In the 61st minute, Kieran Tierney was taken off with an injury, which was later confirmed to be the last action he would play at the tournament. Now, for as much as he was a left back playing centre back, Kieran Tierney is one of Scotland's best players, most consistent players. Missing him would be noticeable. So considering that Tierney and Porteous were out, we were looking quite thin in a backline that already wasn't great.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
So, going into the Hungary game, this would be our lineup. Scott McKenna would come in for Kieran Tierney. Otherwise, it remained pretty much the same, and again, we were looking for a better performance. Hungary had lost their 2 opening games to Germany and Switzerland, so Scotland were actually sitting in front of them. Now, if we drew this game, there was a chance we could go through, but it was a slim chance, whereas if we won and got to 4 points, we would be pretty much guaranteed to go through as one of the best third place teams. Now, Scotland had a lot more possession in this game and actually looked like the better team, but we were so indirect. Our midfield was actually controlling the game, our defence looked pretty solid. However, we just couldn't get any cohesion in our attack whatsoever. Half-time came and it was still 0-0. Scotland, you did feel, had definitely had a chance in this game. The belief amongst the fan base was definitely growing, and I for one seriously thought we could take something from this game. Now, in the second half, this is where things started to get quite bad. Scotland continued to be, I would say, the better team in this game. However, in the 74th minute, from a corner, Hungary striker Varga collided with Angus Gunn and was left on the floor in a pretty bad state. Stretchers came on with Captain Dominic Szoboszlai actually grabbing the stretcher and pulling it towards the player, trying to bring in some urgency to the medical staff. Obviously a terrible thing to see, and it's similar to what happened with Eriksson at the last tournament. However, because of this lengthy injury, obviously there would be a lot of added time. Scotland made a lot of attacking subs to try and win the game. Stuart Armstrong, Lauren Shankland, Kenny McLean, Ryan Christie and Lewis Morgan all came on at different points, and with 10 minutes of injury time added on, this game really became end to end. Now, in the 79th minute there was a big controversy. Scott McTominay played a ball through to Stuart Armstrong of all people, who was brought down in the box. The referee gave nothing and said that Willie Orban made a fair challenge. This was absolute bullshit. How the referee fucked this up so badly, I will never understand. Stuart Armstrong was 100% brought down and fouled in the box. Would Scotland have scored the penalty? Well, we have to assume that we would have, obviously. And in a 1-goal game, that really could have won us the game, because Steve Clarke would have just brung on 8 defensive mids and held out for a 1-0. However, the ref never gave it. Scotland kept trying and kept pushing. However, in the last minute of injury time, basically the last kick of the ball, Hungary scored and won the game 1-0. Absolute heartbreak for Scotland, and even Hungary, it turns out, after the group stage had finished, even they wouldn't have went through either.
That was a penalty, ref, ya fucking doughball.
Okay, now that we've covered all the games, I'm just going to give my thoughts on everyone. Starting with Angus Gunn, listen, he was absolutely dreadful in the Germany game, but we all were. I'm going to try and avoid focusing too much on that game unless I have to. I thought he was brilliant against Switzerland and done his job against Hungary. Both goals he conceded in those games were not his fault. I think he's taken far too much criticism across this tournament, and honestly he was not that bad. Andy Robertson, for once, I thought actually had a pretty good consistent run of games in a Scotland shirt. He used to take a lot of criticism in the early days for being far better for Liverpool than he is for the national team, but that hasn't been the case since qualifying for this tournament. He's been fantastic and he was very good at this tournament. Kieran Tierney, it was unfortunate, he's a good player for us, but the injury, it's not really anyone's fault. We probably would have been a better team against Hungary with him in the squad. Scott McKenna, Jack Hendry and Grant Hanley all done their jobs. They weren't necessarily that bad, and against Hungary, Grant Hanley had the game of his career, momentarily forming into Mick Maldini. There are, however, 2 defenders I want to take a closer look at. First off, Ryan Porteous. This fucking idiot should be giving an apology to the nation. He always had this rash sort of hot-headedness in his game, even from when he was at Hibs, and we never, as a nation, we never drilled it out of him in time. Now that he's at Watford, I don't think we'll ever be able to get this out of his game. It's something we're just going to have to live with, that he is prone to these moments of just being an absolute clown. Considering he featured heavily and was one of our best players in qualifying, to only get one half of football out of him at the tournament, it was really, really poor. And the other one is Anthony Ralston. I'm not going to criticise him too heavily because I understand he was thrown in at the deep end, but in all honesty, he wasn't good enough. He could have been used as a compass if you had our goal always facing north, because all he ever did was play it back to the keeper. It's not his fault that, you know, the two people in front of him got injured, but I think once Hickey and Patterson come back to fitness, it's maybe best that he takes some time out the squad. Moving into the midfield, and I mean, Ryan Christie was pretty dreadful against Germany and didn't feature much after that. I don't think McGregor or Gilmore necessarily had bad tournaments. I think Gilmore was a bit better than McGregor though. McTominay scored our only goal, so fair play to him, he is pretty much our only consistent goal threat. And I'll be honest, I thought John McGinn had a very poor tournament. He's the highest scoring player in the team. And to be honest, I can't remember any part across any of the 3 games where I thought he really looked dangerous going forward, which is what we really needed him to do. Maybe you can say Steve Clarke was using him in the wrong position, but he's been brilliant for Scotland under Steve Clarke for a long time now, so I kind of trust the way he's using him. Another player I will criticise is Shea Adams. As a lone striker, he is not good enough. It's not necessarily he's not good enough as a player, he just does not fit Steve Clarke's system. I think had Lyndon Dykes been fit, he would have played over him. I'm surprised Clarke didn't use Shankland more. I think against the bigger teams going forward, if we want any success out of Adams, it's maybe a better idea to just play him out wide. But I just don't think he works as a striker in this system. Overall, for as dreadful as the Germany game was, Scotland fans, we should not be too down about this tournament. We were one dodgy refereeing decision away from potentially going through for the first time ever. I've seen a lot of people saying that Steve Clarke should maybe be removed as the manager, and if that's your opinion, that's fine. However, it's not mine. I think should he have a disastrous World Cup 2026 qualifying stage, then yes, we could look to replace him, but for now, I think he should stay in charge. The hope that we got after the Switzerland game, which genuinely was a decent performance, was great, and we were not that bad against Hungary. We just sort of went for the win in the game a bit too late on. However, that is the Euros done for Scotland, and we can look positively towards qualifying for the World Cup. We'll need to wait and see what our group looks like, and our next scheduled games are the Nations League. But I very much enjoyed the run of getting to Euro 24, it was brilliant. The Scotland fans were adored over in Germany. And we need to keep the positivity in the team and hope that we can keep having a lot of young players come through and develop into the national team. I look forward to Scotland's next set of games and the next chance I get to cover them in one of these videos. But that will do us for now for a Euro 24 review. So I just want to say to everyone that's made it this far into the video, once again, thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoy my content, please consider hitting the subscribe button, it really helps me out. And I'll catch everyone in the next video.